Good evening, and thank you to June and Shelf Life Books. I hope you all support this fine bookstore if in Calgary, perhaps tonight by purchasing one of the books. I'd also like to begin tonight's reading by acknowledging the rich history of storytelling that precedes settlement. It's important to acknowledge that no matter where we are tonight, Calgary, Saskatchewan, California, we reside in significant places mentioned in oral histories, written documents, and maps. I welcome everyone to an evening of storytelling. I'd also like to congratulate our 4 authors on their new books. Tonight, you will meet Joanne Jackson, Kelly Kaur, S. Portico Bowman, and Anthony Bidulka, and hear from their brand new novels published this month by Stonehouse Publishing. Each will read a short passage, and then I have a few questions for them, although there's much to talk about with these books. These 4 authors have formed friendships through this publishing journey, and I hope you enjoy the rich connections between each one of them, and also between their novels, though each novel is fresh and distinct, which you will soon see. So let me invite first a reading by Joanne Jackson from her novel, A Snake in the Raspberry Patch.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanne. Hi, Ron. Hi, Heather. Who else is on there? Karen. A few people that I know. I'm going to read an excerpt of chapter 1. Okay. Dad and some men from the neighborhood have congregated in our living room to toast the birth of my brother with a glass of rye. But mostly the conversation is about the trouble that's happened down the highway at the Tremblays. It's all anyone has talked about for days. I'm on my front step because Jennifer, my best friend, is walking over from her house a few blocks away. Mr. Pendergrass, her next door neighbor, is escorting her. Kids haven't been allowed to go anywhere since the afternoon it happened. Now she and Mr. Pendergrass are late and I have to get outside because our house is full of men. The inside door is open, allowing what little breeze there is on this hot evening to blow through the screened-in front porch. And Dad, not paying as close attention to his daughters as Mom would want, allows the men to talk freely. Deciding to make the most of being stuck out here, I slide behind the dogwood bush where I can hear them without being seen. All I've been able to discern is that the Tremblay family were killed the same day my brother was born, but I know a few of the details. I've heard some of the older kids talking outside Fog's grocery store or while they're gathered at the park where they can smoke without being seen, but mostly they tell me to get lost before I can hear much. Knowing Dad wouldn't know enough to restrict me, last night after supper, I sat down in front of the television to watch the news. I'd made the meal, ground beef casserole with noodles, then washed and dried the dishes by myself. I figured if I was old enough to be chief cook and bottle washer until Mom came home, I was old enough to sit down and do the same thing my parents do after the supper meal. Lloyd Robertson had just welcomed the viewers to CBC when our phone rang. It was Mom calling from the hospital. She said that under no circumstances is Elizabeth allowed to watch the news on TV. I don't know how she knew what I was doing, but she did. I was resentful about Mom's decree, but I didn't argue, even though I'm more intrigued than scared. How could someone walk up to a stranger and shoot him in the head? Or kill a child as he ran away like those high school kids said he did? These things happen in the big city and you cluck your tongue and say, what a shame, that poor family. I'm glad I don't live in a crime-infested place like that. Here in Willis Bend, in the middle of farmland from horizon to horizon, except for an invasion of gophers, a deluge of hail, or a plague of grasshoppers, nothing ever happens. I listen as the men's voices go around the coffee table. Some I can put a face to, some I can't. Mr. Henderson speaks first. Marge was sitting on the front porch playing cards with the youngest, executed her and the little one right there. I don't know which would be worse, shooting Marge first so the daughter sees, or the daughter first for Marge to witness. I can't even imagine. His voice pauses before he says, don't know what in the world would possess him to take Marge's tongue, and I gasp, pressing the back of my hand over her mouth so Dad won't hear. Henry and his oldest boy must have been checking the crops and heard the shots, Mr. Krieger says. Drove home to see what the noise was. They didn't have a chance. Another boy was found in the hedge that circles the house, shot in the back, Mr. Fogg says, probably trying to get away. Only blessing is the shots were dead on and every one of them died quickly, the coroner said. At least he left the children intact, Mr. Krieger says. If I catch him, I'll tie him up, gouge out his eyes, they cut off his. My rubber ball slips out of my hand and bounces down our walkway to the front sidewalk. Instead of slowing down, it picks up momentum as it heads across the street, ending up in the front yard of the Hendersons. I know at 13 I'm getting too old to play with children's toys, but I still like to see how high it'll bounce before it's just a black dot in the sky. In the quiet, he heard the chug of liquid being poured. When's Patricia coming home? Mr. Henderson asks. Tomorrow, Dad says. You finally got your boy, Jim. Glasses clink as the men toast my brother. He's going to have to learn to defend himself growing up with 5 sisters, Dad says. 2 months before my 2nd birthday, Rose was born, and I quickly came to hate her because Mom didn't pay attention to me anymore. Rose is the only one of the now 6 kids who was born at home. Mom has always said that girl just wanted to start living and wouldn't wait another second to be born. Hoping for a boy and thinking time might make a difference, Mom didn't give birth for 5 more years, but to no avail. She had another girl and named her Francine. Then I felt sorry for Rose because she was in the same predicament as me. When Fran was 3, Robin was born, and we all hated the new baby, though I think Franny was only trying to emulate her older sisters. When poor little Robin had just passed her 1st birthday, Alexander came along, but none of us hated Alex. She's the only one with blue eyes and strawberry blonde hair, the rest of us having green eyes and red hair like Dad. Mom, who has blue eyes and dark hair, calls us her raspberry patch. For the past few months, the whole family has been suggesting names for our new sibling. I liked Marie, which is Mom's middle name. Dad picked Marjorie, but Mom said that's only because it's the name of a girlfriend he had before I met her, and she winked at me. My youngest sister wanted Snow White, but changed to Violet when Mrs. Oliphant took us to see the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and Rose wanted the more modern name of Kimberly. Mom had picked Janet for its girl's name, but unbeknownst to the rest of us who hadn't even considered a boy's name, she'd been saving the name Cole for years, hoping one day she'd have a son to christen. Dad didn't stay at the hospital with Mom this time. At 3 a.m. when she went into labor, he helped her into the car while I put a sleepy Alex, Robin, and Franny in the back seat. He dropped the girls off at the Oliphant's farm, took Mom to the city, then drove straight back home. At 8 a.m. when the phone call came, I was prepared to watch his shoulders droop as he found out he had yet another daughter. Instead, he stood tall and gave one of his rare smiles. Now Cole is the 6th in line and the only boy in our little dynasty, and we will always remember his birthday of July 21st, 1971, because it's the day the Trombley family was massacred down the highway that leads to the city. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Joanne. If you like the idea of this murder mystery and family saga, then The Snake in the Raspberry Patch is what you just heard from. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
I would next like to introduce Kelly Kaur, who's going to read to you from Letters to Singapore. Welcome, Kelly.
Hello, everyone. To all my family and friends out there, I love you. To the rest of you, I love you too. I'm going to read 12 November 1985. Sim writes to her friend Anita. It starts from Lynn, her roommate, moving in unexpectedly. I begin. I decided to attend my first Canadian residence party on campus, the famous Res Party. The evening finally arrived. Pumped and excited, I put on my pink blouse, my pink pants, my pink belt, my pink socks, my dainty pink shoes. I had pink hair clips, pink earrings, pink bangles, and pink eyeshadow. My final glory, pink lipstick. As I stared at myself in the mirror, I felt beautiful, hot, sexy. Linz, my roommate, stared at me and murmured, "You look like cotton candy." I glared at her. I wanted to strangle her, but I didn't want blood to mess my amazingness. I looked at my watch and it was 10 o'clock, a time I was never ever allowed to go anywhere in Singapore. I felt adrenaline rush through my veins. Defiance felt good as I started the long walk alone down the main floor of Kananaskis Hall, through the meandering corridor to the main cafeteria, where they held the famous res parties for all resident dorm dwellers on campus. With each step, my feet felt like lead. My stomach turned to bile. I heard the deafening sound of music. I froze at the entrance of the cafeteria. The familiar long rows of tables and chairs were gone. It was an open space of mayhem, where hundreds of unrecognizable faces moved in some sort of frenzied, giant masturbation dance, hopping up and down with their hands in front of them in unison for a song they recognized, but I had never heard of in my life. I casually sauntered to the middle of the crowd and pretended to look cool. A pink virginal sacrifice. Now that I think of it, Anita, I peered in the darkness, but I couldn't recognize a single person. I could smell alcohol, and I had to dodge dancing drunks sloshing their beer on my pinkness. "Hey, Pinky!" a disembodied voice shouted at me. I waved, smiled, and pretended to be one of them, whoever that was. I reached the end of the jam-packed room and gyrated confidently in unison with the screaming voices, shouting, "Do money for nothing, chicks for free." Yeah, I danced by myself. People were in clusters, swigging from bottles of beer. The floor was sticky and messy. I felt beer seep into my brand new pink shoes. Suddenly, someone grabbed my arm and pulled me into the dancing circle. Bobbing heads, grabbing arms, woot, woot, punched fists in the air. I couldn't recognize anyone in the group of dancers as the strobe lights were blinding. My mind screamed, I can do this. I can do this. Woot, woot. I joined in the circle. Then the crowd went wild when the Starship song came on. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Everyone screamed at the top of their lungs. More beer spilled on my pretty pink blouse. I was now trapped in a mesh of bodies, arms, squashed and tossed in the frenzy. The only one who was not drunk was me. I froze. An intense wave of fear overcame me. I felt my cheek wet with unexpected tears, petrified, alienated. I wasn't prepared for this party. I didn't know how to belong. Little lost Singaporean. I frantically disentangled myself from the sticky, fervent arms grabbing and touching me all over. The next thing I knew, I shoved everyone out of my way and ran out all the way to my dorm room. The hallway was now littered with empty beer cans and meandering trails of barf. Anita, can you see it? Pink virgin in the valley of vomit. I fumbled with the lock of my dorm door. I kicked my shoes off and threw myself in the single bed on the right of the room in the complete darkness, praying that my roommate Lynn was dead asleep or dead. Then I heard a voice from the other side of the room sarcastically utter, "Back so soon, cotton candy?" I stashed the pillow on my face to muffle my silent sobs. Enveloped in the smell of beer and sweat, I wept, feeling like a fool until I fell asleep. The next morning, I hurled my pink sacrificial outfit into the giant garbage can in the washroom. Maybe I should have stayed in Singapore and married any rich husband my parents had picked for me. I questioned everything in my life. Welcome to Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly Kaur. You just heard an excerpt from Letters to Singapore, which is a story of friendship, of struggle and triumph, told through letters and set in Calgary in the 1980s. Next, I invite S. Portico Bowman to read from her book, Cashmere Comes from Goats. Welcome, Portico.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, June. Thank you, Shelf Life Books. Thank you, Stonehouse Quartet. Thank you all. And thank you, Susan Hoffer, for being here, and Karen Cranston, names I could see. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so can you hear me okay? It's hard to know how do you project on your computer, you know? Okay, so chapter 1, Aqueous Humor. Joanna paused. Robin looked up. You don't seem depressed, Joanna said. Robin looked down again. Deadheading all of her peonies was not extreme. The article said snap behind the retired flower. In Robin's case, that meant the entire plant. All were now dead and completely retired. They were supposed to live 100 years. That's what the woman at the greenhouse said. I believed her. I shouldn't have. I did exactly what she told me to. Exactly? Joanna said. Yes, I even made the special soil and I followed the directions on the fertilizer bag. Exactly? Joanna asked again. Exactly, Robin replied. Every year? Robin paused. Mostly. Mostly? Joanna said. Well, more or less, at least for the first year. When was that? Joanna said. Oh, I don't know, 8? Yes, 8 years ago. I bought them the year after Mum died. They were going to be like my grandma's house and go all along the walkways and around the house. You don't have walkways, Joanna said. Yes, I do, Robin said. It's not a long walk, but it's long enough. I bought 68 plants. You're not always right. I do have walkways. You need to fertilize every year, Joanna said. I fertilize most years. That's close enough. Large handfuls here and there. I think there was more here than there and not enough of either, Joanna said. Robin pressed her lips together. I'm glad they're gone. 100 years is a lot of pressure. Robin's eyes tightened. The aqueous humor resisted. She felt old. Not 52 years old like she was, but more like how she imagined old was going to feel. Wilted, wasted, drained. I think you are, Joanna said. What? Robin replied. Depressed. I'm not depressed, Robin looked at the menu in her hand. She fiddled with the corners and picked the plastic laminate further apart. Robin wondered when Gertie would get new ones. Robin had been picking plastic corners at Gertie's cafe for 10 years. She sat in the same orange, almost Eames plastic chairs pulled around the same white tables that dotted the interior of the cafe like button mushrooms. And yet the sameness was also Gertie's charm. Lampshades suspended awkwardly blocked the view of any patron over 6 feet, accounting, in part, for why almost everyone inside was a woman. Stressful weeks spilled out of conversations, sporadic yoga mats spiking the air like surrender flags. Everyone stored legs and purses under the generous table overhangs. Most of them wore jeans that were too short or too tight. And favorite t-shirts with logos from marathons, half marathons, or nearby farmers markets in faraway places. Joanna's wash of ink-black hair fell across her face. She tried to look at Robin, under the table, and into her purse at the same time, while quickly bobbing up. Joanna's hair snapped back into a thin line. She pushed on her glasses so she could read the menu. She pulled off the rectangular black frames to look at Robin. You're depressed. No, Robin tucked a tawny golden red piece of hair behind her ear. It almost reached and then fell out again. I'm angry, but I'm not depressed. Robin stopped, and if I wasn't angry, then I'd be depressed. Joanna tried to speak. Robin stopped her. Don't judge me. You don't know what it's like. Look here. Robin's fingers thwacked the back of the menu. It says right here, I'm hard-boiled, scrambled, poached, charbroiled, but I'm not depressed. Justin Bieber is depressed. I'm not depressed. What? Joanna said. Justin Bieber? How do you know about Justin Bieber? From his blog. Justin Bieber is blogging about his depression? Well, someone is, Robin replied. What were you doing reading about Justin Bieber? Joanna asked. I wasn't, at first. I was reading about the potato blight in Ireland. What? It was a link, Robin said. From where? I don't know, somewhere. I was looking for a movie. You don't watch movies, Joanna said. I do now, Robin said. Joanna looked surprised. People change, Robin offered. She pushed the loose golden red strands behind her ear. They still didn't reach. Robin's hair was a rodeo. You're depressed, Joanna concluded. Robin ran her tongue over her teeth and then pushed from behind into the space, put there by nature and protected by Robin's stubbornness. She didn't want braces. Perfect teeth were bourgeois. Robin learned the word early. She liked it, and she liked her mouth the way it was. Maybe, Robin replied, maybe, but that doesn't make you right. Just observant. What I am or am not isn't the issue at the moment. You are, Joanna said. I'm empty. Robin tasted gall. She was betrayed by circumstance. It wasn't Joanna's fault. She could expose Robin. 4 decades of friendship was to blame, not Joanna, not Robin. It's ridiculous, really, Robin said. What? Joanna said. Bloom, she was only a dog, and not exactly my first dog. I should be over it by now. It's been 3 months. Saliva gathered in the corners of Robin's mouth. She was bothered by this display of excess and erased it with fingers long but not elegant. Robin remembered how she'd looked up at the clock on the wall in the vet's office. The big hand had touched the tip of the golden ear flopped over on the retriever. Robin had thought about how Dr. Davenport was ready to retire like the clock in his wall, but if the clock still functioned according to the rules of known physics and planetary motion, Robin could see that Bloom was now dead for 2 minutes. Bloom hadn't looked dead, but what did death look like? Skulls and crossbones were the child's play of pirates, or they were copied monotonously on empty plastic bottles fading in the landfill. Cadavers were more sculptural than anything living or dead, and neither resembled the absence of Bloom's samoyed white fur moving. But Dr. Davenport's trembling yet capable hand setting the now empty needle on the table did. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you, S. Portico Bowman. From reading from Cashmere comes from Goats, which I suppose is a love story of sorts, perhaps not a romantic love story, not an unrequited love story, or a love a daughter has for her father or her dog, or for herself, but maybe all of them and so much more. Last to read this evening is Anthony Bidulka, reading from Going to Beautiful. Please welcome Anthony Bidulka.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, everybody. And sorry, Lisa, it is a tough name. It's Bidulka. I know I get it wrong sometimes myself too. Hi, everybody from Saskatchewan. Good to see you all. Now, I think most of us are familiar with fairy tales and the requisite happily ever after endings. Going to Beautiful begins where the fairy tale starts to crumble around the edges. There is loss, there is grief, there is what may be a murder or 2 or 3, but no worries. I can tell you that this book is also brimful of joy and hope and the promise of new beginnings. What I wanted to do for you tonight is to introduce the main character, who's a fellow named Jake Hardy. He's a celebrity chef. And when we first meet Jake in the book, what is probably one of the most horrific things possible has befallen him. He has gotten a man cold. So, struck down in his prime with this horrible, horrible affliction, Jake has come home from work. He has holed up in the guest bedroom of the home that he shares with his husband, Eddie, and their beloved French bulldog, Lulu. He sort of wakes up and realizes that he's left his medication in the kitchen, so he needs to get there. Once in the kitchen, I found my stash of meds. I swallowed some, I downed 2 glasses of water, and checked the freezer for mint chocolate ice cream because I was pretty sure that Eddie would have gotten me some because he knew I was sick. Disappointed, I set out on my return death march, propelled only by the promise of a warm bed. That was when I noticed it. A flickering light. It was coming from the other side of the sliding glass door that separates the living room from our expansive outdoor terrace. I took a shaky step towards the light. Wait a second. Isn't this what you do when you're about to die? Was I about to die? Did I feel compelled to step into the light? Had I taken too many drugs? I checked my pulse. Seemed strong enough. It was too early for Eddie to have gone to bed, yet there was no sign of him or Lulu in the apartment. Could they be out there on the balcony at night in March? The weather, it had been unseasonably warm that week. They had to be out there, right? Satisfied with the explanation for the flickering light and convinced I wasn't dying just yet, I turned and headed for bed before the NyQuil kicked in. I was about halfway down the hallway when that itty little bit of rationality that still existed in my congested head told me to stop. Eddie would be worried about me. He was sweet that way. As a good husband, I should poke my head outside and announce my status as still breathing. I owed him that much, even if he hadn't bought me the ice cream. With the blanket wound tightly about me, I did a geisha walk from hallway to balcony door. The first thing I noticed through the glass was Lulu, frantically pawing at it. Was she out there alone? Had Eddie somehow forgotten her out there and gone to bed after all? I strained to see out, but I saw no sign of him. I slid open the door. Lulu rushed inside, shooting me a belittling look. From this vantage point, most of my view was blocked by a wall of reindeer moss. I stepped onto the balcony, grimacing as my bare feet made contact with the cold floor. It was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped past the reindeer moss. The light I'd seen from the kitchen was coming from a statuesque liquid lava lamp. But where was he? Despite protective layers of quilting, I felt a chill, and not the fever-induced kind. I moved forward and called out, "Hello?" "Hello," came a response. And there he was, Eddie, standing in the shadows. For several seconds, we just stared at one another. "How are you?" he finally asked. I mean, did the pile of drugs in the kitchen tell him nothing? And hadn't he checked in on me earlier and found me half dead? Or did I hallucinate that? "You should go back to bed," he said. Go back to bed. Was I disturbing his evening? I mean, it may have been the fever, but his apathetic suggestion really ticked me off. I mean, where was the caring? Where was the worry? Where's the bloody mint chocolate ice cream? But before I said any of that, I remembered the sage advice of our neighbor and good friend Baz when she told me, if you don't have anything nice to say, mumble it under your breath and walk away. And that's exactly what I did. And that's exactly the last time I ever saw my husband, Eddie. Thanks.
That was a reading by Anthony from Going to Beautiful.
Anthony who, Lisa?
Anthony. This is a prairie story. It is a murder mystery full of small town warmth and cold, cold winters. I just want to point out that Shelf Life Books has put a link in the chat, so you can purchase one or all of these books right now while you're on the screen. But we are going to, Shelf Life Books has just put the link again, so it's right there at your fingertips. And we say thank you again to Shelf Life for being such an amazing bookstore. So support Shelf Life, support these writers. And we're going to, I'm going to ask some questions so you can, if you're not quite sure yet, get a little bit more understanding of what's going on with these characters within the pages of these books. So I'm going to ask two authors the same question, and they're going to illuminate you with their understanding of their characters and the setting, or whatever the question is. So I'm going to start with Kelly and Anthony. And here's the question. The reader experiences deep cold along with Simran in Letters to Singapore, who faces her first winter in Calgary, and both Toronto residents, Jake Hardy and Baz, who find themselves in beautiful Saskatchewan in a snowstorm. The cold in each of your stories make for an ache and an irritation, at least at first. Do you consider winter as a character in your story? And, or how do you feel the frigid temperatures your protagonists meet shape your story?
Kelly, you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you very much, Lisa. I think unexpectedly in my story, Winter becomes the antagonist. So we have Sim and Winter, and it defines her in so many different ways. Until she can become part of Winter, she will always be the outsider. What shoes to wear, what jacket to buy, how not to kill herself, just very basic things that every Canadian knows. An immigrant does not, until in this case, Sim befriends Winter, the antagonist, and that is what the story takes us through, her many misadventures and the memory and the remembrance not to lick a frozen lamppost.
I think, well, I mean, early in my career, I read this review, and I mean, shamefully, I have long forgotten who the author was or what the book was, but I remember what the reviewer said. And they were talking about how wonderful it was that the author never forgot to talk about how things smelled or tasted or felt against the skin, really engaging all the senses to convey, setting or circumstance. And I always love that, because I think if it's done right, it can really make a piece of writing come to life. And I've always aspired to do the same thing. I think because of where I'm from, so I live in Saskatchewan, I often do this by way of weather. Maybe it's because we have so much of it and it's quite changeable and it can be dramatic. Describing the weather can be so much more than just, the storm is coming. You can talk about how the wind lashes your face, or how pinpricks of rain can feel like a bee sting, or how, when you get that rumble of thunder and it feels like it's coming from inside of you instead of around you, or that smell of electricity in the air, long before the storm comes. Winter has become, I think, my favorite weather to write about, and it does become like building a character, because like any character, winter can affect outcomes. It can tell you a lot about the people as it interacts with them. And it can be a gloriously heroic character, or it can be a very dangerous antagonist. I think in books and movies and TVs, we often see Canada and the prairies described as this place that is, perpetual winter. It's always cold and dark and gray. And those things can be true, but it can also be beautiful and bright and refreshing and incredibly beautiful. And that's how I like to portray winter. In Going to Beautiful, there's a line that, although it's spoken by another character, it's actually the character of Winter speaking through that character, telling something to the reader. And the scene is, it's an elderly nun. She's outside at night. It's dark. She's on a balcony. She's watching this very gentle snowfall. And she says, I like to pretend the reason each snowflake falls slowly is because it must first decide where to land. In context, that line is a metaphor for a journey that one of the characters has to go through. It's a very simple line, but I probably rewrote it 20 times to make sure that Weather said what I wanted Weather to say, just as you would with any other character.
Thank you. If you choose to read Going to Beautiful, you will experience Anthony's writing when it comes to weather and the cold. It will stay with you even in the summertime. He does an exceptionally beautiful job with the cold and the weather. And Kelly, you will, reading her character Simran, you will all know that moment when you've seen somebody on the street in the cold who was wearing the wrong shoes and trying to make it down the street in the wrong shoes in the winter. And you feel for that person because you want to help them out. And Simran goes through that. And she also has an experience with a coat, not unlike her experience with her pink outfit. So the clothing plays such a significant role in your book, Kelly. Thank you both for those answers. We will move on. And well, Kelly, we're going to stay with you. And I'm going to invite Joanne to this question. In your story, Simran, a young woman character, and Liz, a child, are at a point in their lives where they need to assert independence from their families. Once dutiful children, readers experience both sneaking around to make sense of new realities. Ultimately, though, independence brings new understanding about family and their place in it. Can you comment on your characters' roles within their family unit and how seeking independence ultimately brings them back home, without giving too much away?
Go ahead, Kelly.
I think that independence seems so easy. You're free, go, run in the wind and grasp it. But in the novel, Sim realizes that she's ill-equipped to understand and take that independence that's given to her in Calgary, because all she's used to is life of tradition and culture, where even your husband is picked for you. Now, coming with that to the West, where you can do whatever the heck you want-ish, how do you negotiate that freedom? And I think Sim finds it challenging. She gets into all kinds of trouble because she doesn't know when you can say yes, when you can say no, and what are the right things to do. And also, for her to be free, she must disappoint everyone back home. And that is the paradox. No one is happy. So you have to choose your freedom. Do you choose to be free and happy? Do you choose to be not free and make everyone else happy, because there is no middle ground? So read the letters and see what she decides to do. Thank you.
Well, in my story, Liz didn't really choose independence. She rather had independence thrust upon her. And basically, the story is about a child realizing how much work it is to be a parent. And that's what happens to Liz in my story. Her mother looks after her so well while they're growing up. And then she's in the position of looking after her children. I don't want to give too much away. She's in the position of looking after her children, after the children. And now she realizes how hard her mother worked. And she regrets not ever telling her that.
And am I wrong in also, though, that she sort of breaks away from the family in order to solve a mystery as well, in sort of a
Well, she does, but that also, that was another question you were going to ask, but that wasn't her choice. that wasn't her choice either. She was, once again, her mother in the very first chapter, her mother asked her to look after Rose and make sure Rose stays out of trouble. And so that's what she was
Oh,
doing.
right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. All right.
That's okay. She's being the big sister.
She is being the big sister.
Yeah.
Yes, which often that role just falls upon the character.
It
You
does.
write it, and Joanne writes it beautifully. The interaction of the siblings is just written so beautifully in Joanne's story. And the struggle that Kelly's characters, because even though Sim is going through this push and pull between independence and freedom and disappointing who and at what cost, so are her friends and her sisters and even the mothers ultimately. Yeah, read the letters to find out what triumphs, if anything triumphs, but also beautifully negotiated. So thank you, Joanne and Kelly. I'm going to move along to Portico and to Anthony with this question. Readers experience travel to another place in search of answers concerning a loved one. With this travel, new family members in a broad sense are created. Can you talk about the journey your characters faced from leaving the comforts of the familiar to embracing a different culture, and how this journey led your character to opening up their family structure or their definition of family?
Tony, you want me to go?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, Lisa, astounding questions. Like they're so rich, you know. So thank you for that, and you know, for your interest in my story from the beginning. You know, I think was there something the story starts with an understanding that, you know, love is about friendship, not possession, and goes from there. And I think for Robin, her issue is intimacy. You know, that's and she's jealous of what everybody has, that she thinks they have it and she doesn't. And so the travel isn't necessarily unusual for her. She's very good at taking off and throwing herself into places where she can disappear into. But here she's asked to travel and appear, because there's not going to be so much easy. It's not going to be so easy to escape, because that's a challenge for her. And so, in terms of, you know, family, in this story, and I have a ton of material from my own family, but I've been very the story isn't like Robin's parents are sort of so benign in their trauma to her, and yet they made her feel just the way they were made her feel terrible. So then for her, she in some ways had terrible parents, because it's hard to distinguish that I feel that way because of those people, so it's those people that are terrible. So I think as she encounters family in a way that she's never known, she's constantly required to leave the surface definition of what that word means to her. And yeah, so great question.
Yeah, it is a good question. You know, I think despite my reading, you know, a real tragedy befalls the main character of Jake in Going to Beautiful. And it's in that messy aftermath when he travels to places that are familiar to him, favorite getaways, one in the south of France, one on a Caribbean island. But instead of being recuperative, it's the familiarity itself. It's the reminder of a life gone. It's a reminder of, a circle of family and friends that are now gone, that breeds within him this greater depth of despair. I think we've all heard about how sometimes when you travel, you come home and you suddenly just really appreciate your own home and your own country and the street you live in. But we also conversely heard how travel can open up and expand our minds to help us appreciate new places and new foods and new cultures and new language. And I think we can extend that to say that travel may also open us up to new hope and new dreams and new beginnings. In Going to Beautiful, it's only when Jake finds himself drawn to a place he's never been, to the prairies of Saskatchewan in the middle of winter, that unexpectedly healing begins. I don't think he knew he needed it when he first went there. I don't think that he consciously thought that he was seeking a new life or a new family or a new beginning. And he doesn't want to replace what he lost. I think that's important to note. But he does need to start considering that he may have to start building something new for his future. And in this case, travel to a brand new place is what led him on that positive path.
And I think in both your stories, the reason that your characters were able to create or look at a new definition of family, it's because those that they encountered, those characters, those people that they encountered, also were willing to open and redefine and be willing to embrace them as family as well.
Yeah, that's
So
nice.
yeah, they encountered some good people, some interesting people, and and some new fascinating what happens when these characters land upon people they didn't know necessarily they were I don't want to give it away. They land upon a group of new soon-to-be friends and family. What happens, and it's richly wonderful what happens. So well done. And I have to say, Portico, I love your term circus definition of family. I think we understand, a lot of us, what that means. So thank you for that. All right, Portico and Joanne. Robin Hopper and Cashmere Comes from Goats, and Liz Murphy in A Snake in the Raspberry Patch both seek a truth that has nothing to do with them until they make it so. Robin discovers a grown son in France, but not her own. And Liz seeks to solve a murder in her small town with her younger sister. What compels these two protagonists to leave the comforts or perhaps boredom of their small lives to seek answers to something large and even uncomfortable?
Go ahead, Portico.
You know, I would, it's actually, you know what, there's nothing virtuous about how Robin gets herself in her situation. Hurt people hurt people. And so she's just acting out of a deep sense of wounding, and gets herself in a huge mess. And from there, her, she has again another choice. And as I'm learning to talk about the book, it's like it's a story about how hard it is to choose the right thing to do. And so we're constantly watching her try to figure that out. And so she's like a psychological pioneer. She herself is so unclear about what makes her go from one situation to another. And so she's always uncomfortable. And so in that regard, this uncomfortable new setting is the one thing she knows. And it's this sense of comfort and safety that is the challenge. And the setting, thank you, Karen Cranston, for the book on the Qatars and France. You know, the place where some of the key slicing happens, you know, is in a setting where that is not new. So it fit for her to be wedged in there. So yeah, there's really nothing there. Yeah, she does not begin you watch her try to be virtuous about what she's doing, but she's just bored and bitter, and a lot of her regular addictions weren't available to her. She was so far choosing not to go there.
Okay, well, I think I sort of half answered this last time. I think the reason that Liz left the comfort of her home to go on a hunt for a murderer is because she was trailing after her sister, who is two years younger, 2.5 years younger than she is. And she was trying to keep her safe. But I think also while she got up, after she was out there with her sister, she started to enjoy herself. Maybe she thought that, I think I do say it at one point in the book, maybe it's time for her to break out of her shell and start to rebel a little bit and become a teenager and do something that she's not allowed to do, that maybe she's been too shy and quiet in her life and following every rule. So that's why she broke out of her shell, initially to follow her sister, to keep her sister safe. And then she decided that this isn't so bad.
Yeah. There's nothing like a small town murder to get that teenager to come out of your shell. So well done. It works really well. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we have a bit of time if we could probably take a couple from the audience. I didn't ask the authors if they would, but if you want to put something in the chat, I can read it and ask it forward. Please do. I think that would be great. I'm going to ask the final question. I have two more, but I would really like to instead only ask one more and see if we can entertain a couple from you. Thank you for coming. And the last one is to all of you, can you share one example under the heading mishaps of dating, which occurred in your novel?
I'll go for it because I don't know if I have a lot to say, because I don't know if this qualifies as a mishap of dating, but perhaps more of a challenge of dating. I mean, has anyone ever heard of a more star-crossed couple of lovers than a traditional Ukrainian Saskatchewan farmer and a transgender bon vivant socialite from Toronto? That is the couple that I was trying to bring together in Going to Beautiful. He goes by the simple name of Bogdan. She, however, upon first meeting her, insists on being called the more grand moniker of Sebastian Venkata Santosh Kumar Sengupta. And the only thing they really seem to have in common is that they're both in their 70s, which that in itself is not always conducive to dating. I mean, who knows? But I think for me, kind of like the rest of the book, I was interested in investigating, another example of where there's potential for hope and joy and new beginnings in a situation that you might not expect to find it.
Well, Jen in my book, they're at a high school dance and she sort of sneaks out the back door to see what it's like to be with a boy. And Liz comes along and rescues her. That was the only mishap of dating, but unintentionally rescues her. And I think Jen was glad that her friend came along when she did. But that's the only mishap of dating in my book. That I can recall. Yeah.
Well, and I would the whole book for me is uh, it is the mishap, and um, you know, Robin is what's there's a sentence she says people don't she hates the word codependent, but it really just means lonely, and so people don't want to hear that either. So is she's trying to see how if there's any healing that has taken place in terms of that codependent Cinderella training that you know my generation grew up on. So you know the whole book is her trying to unpack a bad date, bad dating life, yeah, dating period.
It is. Yes, absolutely. Kelly.
Okay, so I want you all to pack your bags and we're all going to country X. What? You see someone that you like there? No problem. You have 1 day, maybe 3 months to see if you want to be with them and get married first. You want to spend more time with them? Well, where are your where are your parents? His or her or their parents? Have them all follow you as well. No touching, no kissing, sex only if you want to die. So imagine this. This character then comes to Canada, to Calgary, and it's freedom. And Sim meets different kinds of men, the crazy one, the ones who wants everything, the one who wants nothing, and the one who has weird tastes. So given all these expectations, the character has no clue how to negotiate it except get married in 1 to 3 months. Fair enough? That's dating in a nutshell. Welcome to the Indian life.
Thank you so much. Thank you for entertaining those questions. We have 2 questions from those who are here with us this evening. Lots of kudos too. I should probably, you've got a nice reading, Joanne. Great reading, Kelly. Lots of hearts and claps. Great goats. Beautiful rendered mystery man. Cold. Great reading, Anthony. What a tease. Leaving us wondering. It's off to the bookstore for me. And Sandra Davenport wants to know where in Saskatchewan. I don't know if where in Saskatchewan do you live? I guess so, because Going to Beautiful tells you where in Saskatchewan the book is set. But do you care to tell us where you live in Saskatchewan?
Where I live in Saskatchewan?
Mm-hmm.
I actually live in just outside of the city of Saskatoon. I live on a little acreage about 5 minutes south of town. And it's a great little, 10-acre plot, and love to sort of take my dogs out on walks a couple times every day. It's a lovely place. And especially for me as a farm boy, I grew up on a small Saskatchewan farm, but I still have a city boy mentality too, because a guy's got to shop for shoes, right? So it's kind of perfect for me. I get to live close to the city, but still be in a rural type of environment.
All right. And our last question for the evening, and this is actually really appropriate because Kathy Cram wants to know if you've had in-person readings, which you have, that they had an in-person launch May 2nd. What is the difference between in-person and Zoom in terms of your own enjoyment and audience engagement? Do you prefer one over the other? Thank you, Kathy.
Can I answer that? Because I was thinking that very thing when I was reading. Yeah, okay, cool. Very great question. Yes, so our readings that we had, Edmonton and Calgary, and then I had the one here in California on Saturday. And the laughter, there was a lot there. laughed a lot on Saturday, and I commented on that. And it's because they're already warmed up, right? That's what they are here in California. Everybody's already warm. So I really missed that. I really missed hearing the laughter. So I kind of paused in places that I knew were consistent to the two readings where there was laughing, because I hoped everyone was home laughing. And then to let that little moment pass and then keep going. But it's such an encouragement, to hear that. So I noticed it when we were doing it, but I'm so grateful you are all here on Zoom, and grateful for this. And yeah, so anyway, yeah, I did notice that when I was reading. Yeah, don't know about anyone else.
Yeah. I think they both have their pros and cons. I totally get what you're saying, Portico, because there is this interaction between you and the audience, especially if you're reading something that should elicit laughs. But so I really appreciate those of you who are putting hearts and claps in the chat room, because I've got the chat room open too, and I really appreciate that. So that's good feedback. But one thing that can happen on Zoom is what happened to me at my launch in Saskatoon last weekend, where 90 seconds before I was to come on stage, one of my shoes just collapsed, and I had to go on stage in bare socks. You can't make that up. And it ended up being one of the highlights of the evening, because people started the evening laughing, which is always a good thing.
There's no wine and cheese on Zoom.
That's
no
a good
fabulous
point.
party at Lisa's place after, though we know where she lives. And I think the advantage of Zoom is I'm suffering from a really bad throat and pulled muscle from all that coughing, so I can take some time and relax and drink water and have the kind of drugs that are legal. So I appreciate that opportunity, but the in-person gigs were absolutely fabulous as well. So I think I appreciate both, and whatever comes and the opportunities that come will be there. Thank you.
And I also think, with Zoom, you can reach a lot of people, even though, we're all based in different cities. I mean, the people that are here tonight could be from anywhere, that's a very cool thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm basically quite a shy person, so I find the Zoom much easier to tolerate. And my brother is here, Ron. So, and he's in Kitchener, so he couldn't come to the ones here. My in-person launch is a week from tonight at McNally Robinson, but it's on YouTube, I believe, but it's also in person at McNally. So yeah.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, Ron.
Well, I would like to thank the four of you for letting us into your fictional worlds. Bravo, brava, congratulations. They are beautiful books, and they are rich and funny, and I'm going to say a word that it's like Anthony's last name. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say it properly, so I'm going to come up with another one. They are worthy of your time and your money, and buy them with a friend so you can talk about them further. But I appreciate the four of you talking about your books and reading them. So thank you everybody who came tonight and who are still hanging around. Thank you for coming. Thanks to Shelf Life Books for hosting tonight's events, to Stonehouse Publishing for seeing the beauty and the value in these four stories and bringing them to the world, and to add to Canadian Lit. Thank you, Kelly, Joanne, as Portico, and Anthony for your reading and discussion. Please, if you're considering buying a book, do it through Shelf Life to purchase. There's the link. They hosted tonight, and it's a nice way to say thank you to this beautiful bookstore for providing us the opportunity tonight to share these stories and these authors. So this is the end of it. Thanks everybody for being a part of this evening.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.